Here it finally is, the OLED that everyone's been going into absolute convulsions over. Yes, we are talking about the Gigabyte AORUS FO32U2P or U2 Pro, however you want to say it. This is the version with DisplayPort 2.1, and this is very important because it means you can run the full 4K 240Hz on this monitor without having to use display stream compression, which with Nvidia cards can have some issues. So is this the holy grail of OLEDs? Is this the last one you'll ever need, or does it have issues? Let's find out by first taking a look at the specs, which this is a 32-inch 4K 240Hz 16:9 QD OLED V3 panel with an alleged response time of 0.03 milliseconds. Yes, it does have G-Sync and FreeSync compatibility, and it does come with the standard display HDR 400 True Black certification. Now, in terms of the overall design, I actually really love the way that Gigabyte has made the monitor itself. I think it might just be the best design of them all. It's very sleek, the logo isn't too imposing, and it's not too gamery. However, the stand is absolutely ridiculous. Now, it does move in every direction you would expect it to, except for counterclockwise for some reason. However, it's just way too big. Those feet are total clown shoes. It's definitely not necessary. And for the love of God, Gigabyte, please shrink those down. Now, in terms of the ports, pause if you need to, but the most important part is, yes, it does have two HDMI 2.1 ports, as well as one DisplayPort 2.1 for future RTX 50 graphics cards, hopefully. Now, in terms of the price and the warranty, this does come in at $1299.99, which, by the way, I will have affiliate links in the description below if you're interested in picking this up, which, by the way, this review is not sponsored by Gigabyte. They lent me this monitor for review. I am not keeping it, but it does also come with a 3-year warranty plus burn-in. So it's a high price. It comes with the standard warranty. Is it worth that extra price for DisplayPort 2.1? And is there anything else about this that makes it worth that extra chunk of change? Well, let's find out by first taking a look at the color, which my first impressions are, as always with QD OLED, it's absolutely excellent. Colors just really pop off the screen, especially in HDR, like no other monitor tech can. But in terms of the actual accuracy, it is going to be in a mode that's going to be off out of the box. Thankfully, with some simple tweaking of the settings, you can get it to be pretty good in sRGB, which is the standard for Windows. And of course, I will have the best settings for this display, as well as all displays that I review, in my Patreon link in the description below. So thank you guys for supporting me there. But even after dialing in the proper settings, as you can see here, it is actually over brightening some shadows, which is a shame. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something that Gigabyte should definitely address if they're trying to follow the standard Gamma 2.2 curve, so nothing looks washed out. Now, in terms of the HDR, it's actually overall pretty good. However, much like in SDR, you can't quite get the RGB balance to be perfect, much like many other versions of this monitor. Now, in terms of the color checker, well, thankfully in HDR, it's pretty good with an average delta E of 1.9, but there is a maximum delta E of 5.8. So there's a couple colors here that are a bit off, and it probably would be a little bit better, again, if we could white balance adjust this. But in terms of the color volume, very, very good. 103% DCI-P3 means that you are going to get excellent colors in HDR. Now, in terms of the brightness and HDR experience, much like many other versions of this QD OLED panel, yes, it's definitely bright enough for SDR, using it for desktop usage, that sort of thing. It's good. However, I just still don't think it's bright enough for HDR. It is definitely HDR capable. It is better in HDR, and I would suggest taking advantage of that. However, it just cannot give you those punchy highlights that you see on something like OLED TVs or mini LED monitors. To that point, as you can see here in my window brightness test at the D65 white point, an LG G4 OLED TV absolutely destroys this monitor. We're talking like 3 times brighter. And in terms of a game, again, similar situation. This is the type of HDR experience I do want to see on the LG G4. Here we are on the monitors. They're just falling way, way behind. I mean, even the 32-inch LG OLED, even though it's a little bit brighter, it's really not too far ahead and is still falling far, far short. Now, in terms of the near black performance, here you can see that both in SDR as well as HDR, it's doing very, very good. You are getting a lot of that shadow detail without hardly any of that missing. But now let's go ahead and talk about gaming performance. Is this good for gaming? Well, it's 240 hertz. The answer is going to be definitely yes. Every game that I played on this monitor felt lightning fast and was just super, super smooth and super crisp, whether it's a still image or an image in motion. That's the one benefit you get from 4K 240 hertz that no other monitor can possibly give you. It's the clarity of 4K with the clarity in motion of 240 hertz plus OLED, where OLED has those near instantaneous response times. And even in terms of latency, as you can see here, this is one of the fastest 4K monitors I've ever measured, and the motion performance, just like I mentioned, is absolutely excellent. At 240 hertz, you can start to make out that it's saying better than 60 hertz below the UFO, a really, really good benchmark for displays in motion. Although of course 480 hertz OLED is even further ahead, and I probably would shoot for around 120 hertz or higher on this display if you're going to be picking it up to get some good motion performance. Now, in terms of the features, pause if you need to. There are a ton of them. However, the most important, in my opinion, are going to be the tactical switch button, which does allow you to shrink the screen theoretically to get more performance at a lower resolution, as well as you are going to get the option for KVM, picture-in-picture, and picture-by-picture, as well as, of course, DisplayPort 2.1, the biggest feature of this monitor. Now, in terms of the text clarity and subpixel layout, I'm gonna say it's not great. Now, it's a 4K monitor, so it is pretty good. I mean, 4K is a very high resolution, but the subpixels are in a triangle layout, just like every single other QD OLED. They're not in a line how Windows expects them to be, which will lead to some fringing and some chromatic aberration around the edges of text looking green or red, and this can be distracting. Less so at 4K and really high resolutions like that than it is at 1440p, but it is still a bit of an issue and it might bother some. Now, in terms of the viewing angles and uniformity, QD OLED is nearly perfect. Let's move on to the sound. Yes, this does come with speakers, and I gotta tell you guys, they're real bad. These are awful. Like, some of the worst speakers I've heard on a monitor in quite some time. They are very distorted at higher volume levels. Even mid volume levels, there's a ton of distortion and the sound is very thin. It lacks body and it's just not good. It'll get the job done if you need some sort of sound, but I certainly would not be playing games with these speakers. But in any case, now let's talk about the finish and the perceived clarity, because yes, this does come with a glossy coating, which means you're going to get excellent clarity, excellent vibrancy, and overall a far, far better image than any matte coating could even come close to showing. It's just going to be way more clear, way better looking. However, QD OLED specifically does have some sort of an issue with ambient light turning the screen somewhat magenta or a lifted gray depending on your environment. So you really must use this monitor in a completely dark environment to get the absolute most out of the contrast. Even with a little bit of light, it will suffer, and that's a big problem with QD OLED. However, let's go ahead and talk about if it has any issues. And yes, I did have an issue with this. When I plugged it into a 3080 Ti, the DisplayPort would have dropping out issues, or it would just simply never turn on the monitor. However, switching to HDMI, this was not a problem. I even turned the DisplayPort back to 1.4 instead of 2.1, same issue. So there's something going on there with the 3080 Ti, or maybe I got a bad version, I'm not quite sure, but beware of that. I didn't have it with the 3060, so very strange. However, the menu and firmware, in my opinion, is absolutely excellent. And in terms of G-Sync flickering, this is one of the better ones I've seen. I actually didn't see G-Sync flickering for the first time in a while. However, do be aware, I'm almost certain you will see it from time to time if you're in a very dark environment and you have an unstable frame rate. Just expect, yes, it probably will happen. So overall, I do think this monitor is excellent. I do recommend it. It has a couple of problems, but it's the only future-proof 240 Hz OLED. Now, in terms of what Gigabyte could improve, we do have the raised shadow detail in SDR, possible DisplayPort issues on some GPUs, and no white balance control in sRGB or HDR, so I'd like to see those addressed. However, the infinite contrast ratio, high resolution, fast response times, and HDR support makes this one of the best monitors you can buy today. So again, I will have affiliate links in the description below, and my overall rating for this one is going to be an 8 out of 10, certified excellent, one of the better monitors that I've reviewed in 2024. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, RuPro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable, available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out RuPro on Amazon today.